Welcome back to FNaF Throwback Theories, the FNaF Theory series disguised as a flashback. This is a series where I go back to my old FNaF theories from a long time ago and discuss whether I still believe them, or if I think they make sense, as well as whether the knowledge we even had back then completely debunked it and if I was too stubborn to notice. In this video we have a meh theory about Golden Freddy, a good sister location theory I remade twice, and a good FNaF 4 theory I've remade like 5 times. So without further ado, let's get started. The first theory I want to talk about in this video is called, Who is Golden Freddy really? It was a theory I made about the supposed parallels between Andrew and Jake and Cassidy and the bite victim. I made the video just over 5 years ago now in September 2020. It was one of those videos where I scripted nothing, stuttered constantly, and the only visual in the entire video was just an image of the thumbnail. I made the video when Golden Freddy was a really hot topic in the FNaF community, and it's kind of weird that nowadays there's barely any discussion about him anymore despite the fact that the community hasn't settled on who he is yet. But back then, that debate was huge and resulted in numerous arguments. I argued about Golden Freddy so many times over the years, and I wanted to make my own video about who I thought he was. The theory mostly revolved around the man in room 1280 and how it is the Fazbear Fright's equivalent of Ultimate Custom Night. It was always clear to me that Afton was the burned man, and that's further confirmed in epilogues 6 and 7. Regardless, at the time of this video, I was confident in that. However, I fundamentally misunderstood Andrew and Old Man Consequences. See, Andrew in the story is torturing Afton, as he talks about in the 4th Fright's epilogue. The story discusses how there are 2 separate brainwaves inside Afton's head, and they are fighting for control. Throughout the story, a shadow kid and a kid with an alligator mask are attempting to stop the nurses from killing Afton. Both of these kids are meant to be Andrew, and the fact that one was a shadow and the other was just a normal looking kid seemed to me to imply that Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie are actually just the spirits possessing their counterparts, those being Golden Freddy and Toy Bonnie, since I believe Andrew was Golden Freddy as he is the one you should not have killed. However, I don't even believe Golden Freddy is the one you should not have killed anymore, because Andrew in this story wears an alligator mask, and whether he is the vengeful spirit in the games or not, he's supposed to answer the question of who the one is. So if it was supposed to be Golden Freddy, he wouldn't be an alligator. I also said in that video that Andrew, because he wears an alligator mask, was meant to represent Old Man Consequences, since both of them try to stop people from killing Afton. However, Old Man Consequences is more so trying to let Afton die so he can be freed, while Andrew is trying to keep him alive so he can continue to torture him. Not the same at all. But it gets weirder. In the first Throwback Theories video, I talked about how I used to think that Andrew was meant to represent the bite victim, considering Andrew says he can't see in the Stitch Wraith and the bite victim says he can't see in the logbook. Because Mike says in Sister Location that the animatronics thought he was William, I thought maybe it's possible the other way around. Maybe the bite victim originally started torturing Afton because he thought Afton was Mike. Essentially, he was a Mike trapper. This makes the bite victim the one you should not have killed. But then he finds out the truth, but by then it was too late. Cassidy had begun torturing Afton in Ultimate Custom Night, and characters like Withered Bonnie and Ballora, based on their voice lines, seem like they are aware of what is happening. So I believed Cassidy was essentially holding the spirits hostage and preventing them from moving on. So the bite victim realized he was wrong for torturing Afton and tries to convince Cassidy to stop too. Hence Orville's line of,
"He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us."
Essentially, the crying child is represented by Andrew. He is Golden Freddy, but he isn't the vengeful spirit. He is the one you should not have killed, but at the same time, Cassidy is. It kind of just starts off with the bite victim, and then Cassidy takes over when the bite victim realizes he was wrong. The two Golden Freddy spirits basically fight each other until Ultimate Custom Night ends, which doesn't happen until the end of the Man in Room 1280, where Afton asks to go to the Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center to attach himself to circuit boards which will eventually be used for FNaF VR to make Glitch Trap. Now, there's clearly a lot wrong with this theory. First, the bite victim thinking Afton is Michael is stupid, but also FNaF 4 was likely caused by the bite victim, meaning he clearly doesn't mistake Mike for someone else. Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie also aren't just Golden Freddy and Toy Bonnie clearly, considering we know from Ultimate Custom Night itself and the hide and seek story that they are created by and feed on agony, anger, fear, and evil. The Orville quote was also actually just talking about Henry trying to release everyone with the FNaF 6 fire, and the vengeful spirit keeping Afton alive through it. The bite victim being Golden Freddy I agree with sort of, though I don't think it's that simple. See my Shadow Victim video from last year if you want to know more. But I don't think Cassidy is the vengeful spirit. And Old Man Consequences being a little kid doesn't make much sense either. Also, one of the 2 brainwaves in Afton's head has to be Afton's. Otherwise, he's not getting tortured at all if he's not in his own head. And finally, it's clear by now that Glitchtrap isn't Afton, he's just the Mimic mimicking Afton. If you want to say Afton's agony, even Shadow Freddy, attached to the Mimic in order to create Glitchtrap, I can disagree with you, but I'm fine with that. But Afton just being Glitchtrap? Nah. Next up, we got a theory I wholeheartedly still agree with. The date of sister location. Now, I've made about 3 videos on the topic, and a whole bunch of other theories just mentioning it as a side note or to prove a point about something else. Some evidence over the years has gotten better, some has gotten worse, some has gotten debunked by now, but in this video I'm focused solely on the one I first made, all the way back in November of 2022, again 5 years ago. First things first, this was still before I started scripting my videos. Second, I actually was starting to include some visuals in my videos. It still wasn't good, but it was at least something. I started this video talking about the supposed evidence that sister location takes place before FNaF 1, of which there is very little. First, the odor in the FNaF 1 paychecks being because Mike is a dead body, and the logbook being during FNaF 1 and referencing the events of sister location. However, both of those things are easily refuted. I believed that Ennard being inside Mike was the only reason he looked like a zombie. I didn't realize he was literally a dead body, so I thought if Mike proved he wasn't a League of Legends player and just took a shower, the smell would be gone. Now, I do think I was right that Mike wouldn't smell like shit forever, but because I believe that Remnant has the ability to regenerate a body. So I think I was right that he wouldn't always be dead, I think I just believed that for the wrong reasons. I also brought up the game over screen of FNaF 1, how Mike's eyeballs and teeth pop out of Freddy just like Phone Guy says they will, and yet Mike's eyes look completely normal, when if he was still a dead body, they should look more rotten. I think this is actually a really good point, not because it is a good piece of evidence that Mike was healed, but rather because it points out hypocrisy with the odor argument. That was all the way back in FNaF 1 and 2, way before sister location was planned. So if the odor can be used as evidence, so can the eyes, because they were in FNaF 1. And if Mike was a dead body still by this point, at least one of those things doesn't add up. Plus, Mike also gets fired for tampering with the animatronics, so his odor might just be from touching the animatronics which haven't been cleaned in 20 years even after they had dead bodies in them. As for the survival logbook, there's a modern laptop and a dabbing chica which is a modern trend, so those don't really match the 80s or 90s when FNaF 1 happens. However, I don't think those pieces of evidence are quite as solid as the FNaF 3 office appearing in the background, meaning the logbook is just a replica of the original Freddy's ones, just being a prop for the FNaF 3 horror attraction. I agree with all of that, but I should say there's more than just that. Mike's odor can also be explained by a few things I didn't mention. First, night 7 is the most difficult and stressful night, so he might just be sweating. Second, according to Tape Girl in FNaF VR, Fazbear apparently fires people for dumb reasons when they believe the employee knows something, so Mike might not smell at all. The odor could just be an excuse they made up to have grounds to fire him. Also, the FNaF 1 phone call appears in FNaF 4, and the logbook sees Mike draw Fredbear under the Recent Dreams page, meaning because FNaF 4 takes place from 12 AM to 6 AM, it has to be after FNaF 1, and it can't be during it, so the logbook must also be after FNaF 1 and not during it. As for the actual evidence that sister location is after FNaF 1, while I do think I was right, I think the way I presented it in the video could have been much better. For one, I said Mike's voice is too deep to only be like 18 or 20 years old, and I completely disregarded people saying young people can have deep voices, despite that being completely true. I also mentioned a random thing where in sister location, Circus Baby can say in a very slowed down voice, 1578, which could mean July 15th, 2008, which could be the date of sister location. But that's dumb for a couple reasons. First, I don't even know if this is real. Second, you'd have to assume that this is meant to be a date at all, which it could just not be. And then you'd have to assume that is the date, when it could easily be January 5th, 1978, or May 1st, 1978. So yeah, not good evidence. The last piece of evidence I brought up was how in the fourth closet, Afton destroys the classic animatronics and melts them, then injects them into the Fun Times. That's the remnant mentioned in Molten Freddy's blueprints, and that's what the Fun Times and sister location are made from. The Candy Cadet stories talk about 5 things becoming one thing, and the Freddy Files tells us that the Candy Cadet stories are supposed to be about what happens in the fourth closet. Overall, I still agree with this, but I do think that there's more I could have brought up, like basically everything in the Insanity ending, and there's more detail to bring up with the Candy Cadet stories themselves, like how each story is about a different element of the same event, the key one with the metal, the snake one with the animal mascots, and the orphan one with the dead children. I also don't think I emphasized well enough that it was the actual full-on endoskeletons that were melted together, meaning you can't say that Afton just took part of the animatronics and left the actual endos in the animatronics, splitting the souls. I would say that was a possibility if it wasn't made clear that it's the endoskeletons that were melted together, so if sister location was before FNaF 1, the animatronics just wouldn't be possessed at all. Finally, we have yet another theory that I still believe today. This video came out in May of 2021, about 4.5 years ago. I actually don't know if I scripted it, but you can clearly tell I was starting to find my footing a bit when it came to FNAF theories. I still stuttered a bit, I sounded as if I was trying to be quiet, the audio was very inconsistent, and there's many weird things about the way that I wrote, recorded, and edited my videos. But if you compare this one to the other two, you can tell it is, while not good, much better quality. I actually didn't do any visuals though. Like I do now, I had FNAF gameplay playing in the background, but I didn't tune it to the topic. Like nowadays, if I do a FNAF 4 theory, I'll have FNAF 4 gameplay, and for Secret of the Mimic, I'd have Secret of the Mimic gameplay. Whenever I have my own gameplay, I use that, but if not, I use gameplay that I find online. In this FNAF 4 video though, I used FNAF 1 gameplay, and I just had no visuals for the video beyond that gameplay at all. As for what I discussed in the video itself, I think almost all my evidence was stuff I still believe today. First, I talked about how the bite victim dies during the post-night 6 minigame of FNAF 4, and yet there's 8 nights in the game. Some people believe that the gameplay happened between each minigame, but that doesn't work because if that was the case, there would be no night 7 or night 8. If you think all the nightmares are in the bite victim's coma, that doesn't make much sense since he seems to die on the night after the bite. There's 8 nights in FNAF 4, yet he's only in the coma for 1. Also, according to Scott in a post he made years and years ago, people almost completely solved FNAFs 1, 2, and 3. Yet apparently, quote, no one, not a single person, found the pieces. The story remains completely hidden. I guess most people assumed that I filled the game with random Easter eggs this time. I didn't. End quote. Not only does the knowledge that FNAF 4 was completely unsolved leave absolutely no guarantee that the bite victim is the player at all, but it also means that the appearance of the reversed FNAF 1 phone call is something that actually appears in the player's nightmares. That means the player has to either be Phone Guy, which would be completely random and doesn't make any sense since he dies 4 days after recording that call, and again there's 8 nights, or it's Mike Schmidt, who is Michael Afton. This also means FNAF 4's nightmares are after FNAF 1. Years after the bite victim dies. Some have suggested that the first 4 or 5 nights are the bite victim while the last 3 or 4 are Mike, but the call can happen on any night, so it has to be Mike the whole time. The logbook also shows Mike drawing Nightmare Fredbear, so he must have gone through the nightmares. To be clear, this doesn't mean the bite victim doesn't, it just means what we play is Mike's experience, not the bite victim's. I suggested that Mike actually got the logbook during FNAF 1, but then kept it with him and wrote about the FNAF 4 nightmares later on. Then he got the same logbook back again during FNAF 3. I suggested that the bite victim was part of the remnant in the fun times and he attached to Mike there, giving him the FNAF 4 nightmares as torture shortly before FNAF 3, and then Mike redeems himself by going to work at FNAF 3, showing the bite victim that Mike still cares. Overall, this video presents some really good evidence that I largely still agree with. I have newer theories nowadays about how it all fits together, like how Nightmare plays into all of this by being in the bite victim's coma nightmares, but that the bite victim was actually one of Afton's experiment victims that we learned about in Didophobia. I also actually still do agree with the bite victim inflicting the nightmares onto Mike, though I'm not sure whether it's torture or if maybe Mike gave up on stopping William between the events of Sister Location and FNAF 3 since he never found him, so the bite victim essentially showed Mike the nightmares to get him back on track to stop his father. Or it could just be that he was attached to Mike, which inadvertently caused Mike to experience the memory of the experiments, kinda like the ball pit. I also talked about this earlier in the video, but I completely disagree with the logbook being given to Mike during FNAF 1, considering the FNAF 3 offices in the book itself. Plus, it's just really convoluted for Mike to get the logbook in FNAF 1, then lose it, go through the nightmares, work at FNAF 3, and then get the book back, and then draw about the nightmares. It's kind of like the BV5 theory, which is kind of dead nowadays, but it's basically the theory that the bite victim died in the missing children incident, got revived, then died again in the bite, or the other way around. It's just a little pointless, and it would have been much easier for Scott to just cut out the middleman. Overall, this is one of the better theories I've made in the early parts of my channel, and it represents a really important point where I started finding my footing in the way of FNAF theorizing. If it weren't for this era of my channel, I may not be where I am today. But that's everything I wanted to talk about in today's video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you want to. I am not sure when episode 7 of this series will release, but I have a bunch of FNAF book videos planned for the near future, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!